Yeah, so going from the gigantic to the startup level, one of the little announcements that got my attention was FloQast, a company I've been covering for a long time, raising $100 million round at a $1.6 billion valuation. And although that's great for them and shows their growth, what I really found interesting from a big picture perspective is that FloQast at its heart is a financial close management solution, and they're great at what they do. They compete against Blackline and Oracle and Trintech, but honestly, this is a very niche capability compared to financials at large, as well as process at large, and service orders at management at large. There's a lot of space for other or software solutions out there that have the room to grow at a similar rate and to a similar size. And I think this speaks to how automation and service management are becoming the new hot thing from an application perspective. That we have to look beyond data and analytics, and the boring stuff is now the exciting stuff from in terms of what IT wants to buy.
I'm so happy service and process automation are finally hot and cool again. I mean, this has been my bread and butter forever. I do not know this company. I don't know this space, but I'm going to add one extra layer to it. So obviously, we've been talking a lot about the process and the automation of business processes now suddenly, particularly in the era of AI, a critical building block. And so I think we're seeing all kinds of movement around this. We've talked in the past about ServiceNow and Celonis and others around here that are doing amazing work there. What I think is interesting, and I think you're going to see this begin to play out,
Mhm.
is that this idea of, and this actually applies even to the Google conversation, of broad-based approaches to a market and niche-based approaches to a market. And often at the beginning, that broad-based approach can work really well because people sort of don't know what they don't know. They don't know how to apply this. They're looking at this in these broadest terms. But as markets mature, that niche focus becomes all critical. And so it doesn't surprise me, I guess is what I'm saying, that even though I've never heard of this company, that they're basically now a unicorn because it's focusing on a very specific problem that needs to be solved.
Mhm.
And what I think is interesting about that, and if you're an enterprise tech company, you should be really paying attention to this, is that you're seeing this play out. I mean, look at Oracle's acquisition of Cerner, which is obviously a huge company, but this idea of applying broad-based technology now specific to healthcare. Or look at ServiceNow. We talked about them. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that they've got this massive set of products. Well, why? It's not really different products for the most part, right? In fact, ServiceNow mostly calls them workflows,
Mhm.
right? All this is specific workflows that have been built and tailored for specific use cases, typically industry use cases that are very, much more niche oriented. And I think we're seeing this across the board, is that ability to start taking all of this down and embed some industry knowledge, some expertise around it becomes really, really critical to finding success in the market as you have just this plethora of choices. And I think going all the way back, that's where I think Google sort of is struggling. It's like they're just this big open platform, and it's like, okay, figure it out. And there's just nothing to really sink your teeth into.
Yeah, about a decade ago, there were, I would call it, two platforms that I looked at as kind of being like enterprise Play-Doh. Like they sold the ability to do whatever you wanted with it. And those two were Anaplan and ServiceNow. Basically, they would both go to market saying, we can go into your organization, and then you can set up whatever you want from a planning perspective for Anaplan, service perspective for ServiceNow, and we can handle supply chain or IT or finance or customer service and figure that all out. But what ended up happening is, with Anaplan, simply being able to create that planning capability wasn't enough to continue meteoric growth forever and ever and ever. Whereas for ServiceNow, apparently it does. They continue to grow. I see nothing stopping them from continuing to grow further. And at the end of the day, the ability to map process ends up being a much more scalable capability because it can both support process at a very manual and human level, as well as go deeper into things like AI, where it can actually help map how your AI should work at the end of the day. It ends up being that core piece in the middle that is important to manage from a digital perspective. ServiceNow, was a little bit lucky, a little bit good, but ended up being but obviously has executed like gangbusters and continues to do so with uh, top tier leadership team and great execution. So I think a lot of that speaks to the importance of process, but also like thinking about FloQast for a second. ServiceNow can also manage financial close or any sort of process for that matter if you just create the workflow correctly. But there's still room for these small companies or relatively small companies to come in and hyper focus on specific tasks that are important to the business and still succeed. Those opportunities are still there. There's still best in breed opportunities out there if you choose the right business processes and I'll really align them to the right roles correctly.
Yeah, and what I think is interesting is that this the whole idea of how you transform the sort of broad-based capabilities into value almost always comes down to the application of some form of a specific proprietary expertise, knowledge, data, something, right? And that's always the trick. And so there's a couple of ways you can do that. You can use part of the whole ServiceNow, or like if you look at Databricks, right? Part of their whole strategy is we can help you build that, right? Effectively, it's custom. Or there's companies like FloQast, which is basically saying, hey, you don't need to go build that. This is something that we can create and bring to the table and sort of embed that specialized knowledge directly into the product. And I think both are very viable. Where I think you run the risk of just saying, here's a platform, knock yourself out. And that's where it's, you're going to run into issues. So